Everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Robbie Crager, the Flip Flop Flipper, and we are going to go through today how to analyze your rental property investments. This is what we do. This is how we do it. So we're going to go through, we're going to identify the terms. And as I identify the terms, I'll give you the definition, and then I'll talk about how we use them in real life. All right, let's get into it. So the first thing that we're going to go through is a cap rate. So when you're out there and you're looking at real estate deal after real estate deal after real estate deal, you want to identify the cap rate that someone is offering you the property at. That's what they're selling you the property for, is a cap rate. Here's what it means. Cap rate is the measure of the property's potential return on investment based on its current income. It's calculated by dividing the property net operating income, the NOI, and by its market value. A higher cap rate indicates a higher potential return. So here's how we use a cap rate. When someone offers us a rental property and it has existing revenues already coming in, and let's say for the sake of this argument, I'm going to look at a piece of property that has $1,000 a month worth of revenue, so $12,000 a year, and they're offering it to us at $120,000. That cap rate that they're offering it to me is a 10 cap. And the way that we get there is we take the rents, the $12,000 a year, and we divide by what their asking price is, the $120,000, and you'll come up with a 10 cap. Let's make sure it works. So if you go to the calculator, asking $120,000, they're getting $12,000 a year in revenue, and they're asking $120,000 in price. That's 0.10. That's a 10 cap. So you see how that works. If they were asking $150,000 but still only bringing in the $12,000 a year, they'd be selling at an 8 cap. I hope this is helping you guys. This is just something that you use to determine quickly what the expectations are from the seller of a property. Oftentimes, that's how we're using cap rate. That's what we use it for when we're looking at existing rental properties that have existing cash flow. And so why do we use this cap rate? This is really for us more so. Oftentimes, the guy who's got the property out there for sale, he hasn't even thought about what cap rate he's selling it at, and he doesn't really give a damn. He just wants what he wants, or he's asking what he's asking. He may want less. But for us, we use it so that we can throw out stuff as fast as possible, right? Like, so if somebody is offering me a piece of property at a 3 cap, I don't have to look very hard at that property. If someone's offering me something at a 10 cap or better, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, a 15 cap, I'm going to really think that I'm going to want to look at that property. If they're offering me something and I run the calculations quickly and it's like a 20 cap or better, then I'm going to stop what I'm doing and I'm going to really seriously take a look at this piece of real estate, and I'm going to take a deeper dive and I'm going to try and figure out, is this something that I want to go with? As opposed to if they're offering it at a 6 cap or a 5 cap or a 4 or a 3, the lower it goes, the less interest I am. Even though I could make offers and we could make things worse and we could make things work, we look at so much real estate that we just want to throw out stuff as fast as we can, and we want to dive down deep on the stuff that looks like it's a good deal on the surface. The number two thing that we look at when we're evaluating real estate for rental properties. This is a big one for us, especially when we're buying. We're wanting to determine what's our cash on cash return going to be. And this can be used in a couple of ways, and I'll go through it. But first, let me tell you what the cash on cash return is. This is the metric that calculates the annual percent cash flow generated by the property relative to the amount of the cash invested in the property. So what's that mean? $12,000 worth of rental income on a property, and let's say we're going to have $100,000 invested in it. Our cash on cash return then is 12%. Back to our example. We're looking at a property that has $12,000 worth of revenue yearly, annual revenues of $12,000. Let's say we're buying it for $100,000 and it's a cash transaction. So I'm going to actually put out $100,000 to buy this property. I would have a 12% return on my money. My cash on cash return would be 12%. That's $12,000 of rental income divided by the amount of cash that I'm going to put in the deal, 12%. It's pretty quick, pretty easy math. Again, what do we use this for? We use this to determine, is this something that we want to look further at? Is this a good enough return? And so at 12%, we're thinking a 12% return. That's generally pretty good. Really good cash on cash returns, 20% and up. We get really excited. We stop what we're doing and we start to really take a deep dive on things. So if you're looking at the same deal and you think you can buy it for $100,000, but it throws off $20,000 a year annual revenues or rents, then that's something that would get pretty exciting. 25% is something that we're almost certainly going to buy if it's real. Like if we can return our money inside of 4 years, and that's what 25% does for you on cash cash on cash returns, we're going to buy that. I mean, we're probably going to buy that. If we believe that it's real, that would be something that we would buy. The third one that we're going to talk about is gross rental yield. So this is the metric that shows the property's annual rental income as a percentage of its market value. So it's calculated by dividing the annual rental income by the property's market value. And so we use this one when we've owned something for a longer period of time. This isn't a metric that we use necessarily to determine whether we're going to buy something or not, although you could, but usually you're not going to have so much equity that this figure would matter that much on whether or not it's a good deal. Again, if it's throwing off 25%, going back to the last statement about cash on cash returns, we're not looking at whether or not it's got a lot of equity. But if we've owned that property now, say for 5 or 10 years, now we're looking at what's our return annually, and then we're going to look at what's our return in relation to the gross rental yield, or so what is our rental income as a percentage of the value of the property. So if we think that we're bringing in that $12,000 a year on rental income, and we believe that the property is worth $250,000 if we sold it as a single family house, but we're still only bringing in $12,000. Now, we may only have $100,000 in the property and we're making a 12% cash on cash return, but we have this $150,000 worth of equity that we need to pay attention to, and it helps to determine whether or not we want to keep that property or we want to sell it on to the next person. And it may actually tell you that the highest and best use is no longer to keep it as a rental property, that the values have gone up enough that it's time to sell the property. Number 4, the fourth thing that we look at to determine whether we're going to buy a rental property and whether or not we're going to keep something as a rental property over the course of time is the net operating income. So this is a big one for us after we have purchased a property, and we want to know what the net operating income is, and we want to make sure that we're keeping costs down and that we're running our business well. So the NOI, the net operating income, is a very, very important metric for us. The NOI is the total income generated by the property minus the operating expenses. It provides a measure of the property's profitability before considering financial and tax implications. That $12,000 annual rental income coming in, and you're going to have expenses that come off of that. You may have property management fees, you may have power and water potentially. Hopefully on these small rental properties, you're passing that on to your renter. Sometimes we're not, especially in Puerto Rico. We do some small multifamilies where we've got 1 or 2 meters and we might have 5, 6, 7, or 8 rental units inside of the building. And so we're paying the power and the water, and that would obviously come off of the rental income in order to get us to the net operating income. And I actually like to think about what property taxes are, or the HOA, those things that you would call them financial obligations, but they're expense that's real, and it takes away from you being able to feed your family. So if you have that $12,000 a year in rental income and taxes cost you $1,200 a year, then you're losing $100 a month. And if insurance is another $1,200 a year, that's another $100 a month coming off. And if you've got power and water, and that's another $1,200 a year, that's another $100. Now your $12,000 of rental income just turned itself into $9,000 of net operating income, and you're making less money. You're making $9,000, not $12,000. So number 5, occupancy rate. So occupancy rates are really exactly that. So how much time during the year is your property rented versus how much time during the year is your property vacant. So the metric that indicates the percentage of the time that the rental property is occupied by tenants. A high occupancy rate generally signifies stable rental income and cash flow. We also use this occupancy rate. In fact, we use this occupancy rate much more often when we're determining how we're doing on the nightly rate stuff. So we run our long-term rental income portfolio at about a 90 to 95% occupancy rate. And many years we're up there at 98, 99, 100% occupied. So we will have a window where we've bought something that needs a whole bunch of work. We do the value add investment and we get it to where we can rent it out. And then we find good, stable tenants, and hopefully we keep them for a long period of time. And year over year, we might have, again, 90 to 100% occupancy. And on that long-term stuff, that's what we're looking for. We want to have at least a 90% occupancy rate, as opposed to on the nightly rate stuff where we've got a small guest house, let's say, and we have 7 rooms that are rented every night. We're really happy if we can be at 60 or 65% occupancy throughout the year. That would be tremendous for us. And we're profitable on those things, oftentimes down to like 35 or 40% occupancy. So just keep in mind that it's a really, really key metric for you guys, especially when you're doing the nightly rate rental rental stuff. You're going to live and die by your occupancy rate on the nightly rental. Number 6 is the operating expense ratio. This ratio compares the property's operating expenses to its gross operating income, and lower operating expenses relative to income signify a better profitability. For us, we're telling you what we do and how we do it, and we talk about why. We use this ratio when we're looking at the nightly rate way more than we do when we're looking at the long-term rental stuff. The long-term rental stuff should be pretty stable, high occupancy rates, you don't have a ton of costs, as opposed to a guest house. And we do both, guys. So we invest in nightly rental portfolio here on the island of Puerto Rico, and we invest in the long-term rental portfolio, both in the States and here on the island of Puerto Rico. So when we're looking at operating expense ratios, we're looking at them usually as a function of how we're doing inside of running a small guest house or a small hotel. And what we look for is, what is it that we can cut back on expenses? How can we become more profitable, right? We're trying to look for, through this ratio, places where we can save money so that we can become more profitable. Number 7. This is a big one. This is debt service coverage ratio, the DSCR. And so in the States, the DSCR, this ratio is used for lenders to quickly determine how much your property is bringing in annually and compare that to what a bank would kind of willingly and gladly and quickly lend you on the property. So there's something out there called a DSCR loan, a debt service coverage loan, or a debt service ratio loan. And in this, what they're looking for is the property's ability to pay its debt obligations with its operating income. So it's calculated by dividing the property's net operating income by its debt service payments. So you guys know, if you follow this channel very much, we don't have a lot of debt, but we are interested in these debt service coverage ratio loans, especially on the island of Puerto Rico, in order to unlock some capital that we've had out here for now 5-6 years. And we've got it in stable investments that are throwing off positive cash flow and doing really well. And so if we could get a loan that was based on a function of how much money the property's bringing in annually, we would borrow up to something that we feel very safe with. You know, maybe we borrow 65 or 70 or 75% of the value of the property, provided that we have enough income coming in to cover it and that we can sleep at night and we can feel good about it. That would be a safe loan for us. And so it's an important metric for you when you're thinking about borrowing money. It's an important metric, certainly, for the bank when they're thinking about lending you money. And here's the quick math that you can think about. If you're bringing in $12,000 a year annually, pretty much you could probably borrow up to the point where you're spending $12,000 a year on your loan. So if you're making $12,000 a year, the bank may lend you a loan amount that would have you paying up to about the same $12,000 of debt per year. Probably they want it to be, and I think that if you're going to borrow money, you should probably make it safer than that. And instead of going with the 1-to-1 ratio, if you got $12,000 a year of annual income, maybe borrow an amount of money where you would pay out about $8,000 or $9,000 a year on your debt service coverage. So if you did that $8,000 a year in my example that I continue to use, $12,000 of rental income annually, and you borrow enough money that your debt service is about $8,000 a year, that would be a 1.5 debt service coverage ratio. And a bank would probably be pretty damn happy with lending you that money, because you'd have plenty of money coming in on your rental property to pay back that loan. So you guys use that to go and determine whether or not you should be borrowing against your property, how much you should borrow against it. When you're borrowing money, be very safe, be very cautious. So how much are you getting? And Donna's asking, so in that calculation, how much money are you borrowing? That's determined by what's your interest rate. How long do you amortize it for? What are your taxes? What's your insurance? I'm just saying that if you're borrowing money and it costs you $8,000 a year, that's a 1.5% DSCR ratio, and a bank would be happy to lend you that. So guys, when you're examining these things and you're using these DSCR ratios and then potentially going and borrow the money, why would you do that? You're getting a phenomenal cash on cash return potentially, and you're making money hand over fist, hopefully, inside of your rental portfolio. But eventually, you're going to want to free up some equity. You're going to want to free up some of your invested capital so that you can go and buy the next deal. This is where we're at, actually. And this series is about, this is what we do and this is why we do it. So we're in real time thinking about potentially borrowing money off of our debt service coverage ratio back in the States. And we would absolutely be interested in borrowing money on our rental portfolio here on the island of Puerto Rico. So if you guys know of anybody who's providing this kind of loan, put it in the comments for us. Not only can anyone who's watching the the video see that and use that and give a shout out to whoever it is that's doing these type of loans. But we are potentially looking for this kind of loan product as well. So if you know anybody doing DSCR loans inside of Puerto Rico, let me know. Leave me a comment or send me an email at theflipflopflipper@pr@gmail.com. Number 9, the vacancy rate. So the vacancy rate is the opposite of the occupancy rate. And this is something that is really used, or we use the vacancy rate primarily with our short-term rental stuff, right? And we really like to look at things as glass half full. So we're most of the time looking at occupancy rates as opposed to vacancy rates. But a vacancy rate is the percentage of time that a property is unoccupied. So a low vacancy rate is generally favorable for a rental property. And it's the same thing as the occupancy rate. You want a high occupancy rate, you want a low vacancy rate. If you've got that, either of those things, or if you have one, you automatically have the other. They're both good. So you want high occupancy rate, you want a low vacancy rate. High vacancy bad, low occupancy good. So if the property is vacant for 1 month of the year and you have the chance to rent it for 12 months of the year, that's an 8% vacancy rate. Let's get into number 10. Number 10, the market rent analysis. You compare the property's rental income to the market rents in the area to ensure that the property is competitively priced and maximizing the rental income. So guys, this market rent analysis is something that we do use, and I've gotten in trouble for putting out other content about this, about the market rates versus the rate that we're renting things at. Here's how that works. So if we bought the example we've been using for the entire video, a property for $100,000, and it was bringing in $12,000 a year back 10 years ago when we bought it. And let's say that today we're now renting it for $1,500 a month. So we've raised the rents slightly, but other people in the area are renting the property for $2,000 a month. The difference between the market and our actual rents is the market rent analysis. And that's like a $500 difference. And if we were to get new tenants at the higher price, we'd be bringing in $2,000 a month as opposed to bringing in the $1,500 a month that I'm giving you in this example. And so what do we think about in practicality as landlords and as people who own properties? We obviously want to offset the costs that have gone kind of parabolic with inflation. So things like insurance, things like taxes, all of that stuff we need to offset. So we're looking to raise rents, right? But we also need to keep in mind that people who've been with us for a long time, they may not be able to afford the new rent, and we could lose tenants. We might lose people, and you never know who you're going to get next, right? Like, so these 10 key metrics that we use and formulas that we use as value add real estate investors, as people who own real estate, rent it out for a long period of time. These are 10 ways that you can determine how you're doing in business, whether or not you're going to buy a good deal, whether or not you're doing well, keeping it occupied, all of these things. These are all important metrics. As real estate investors, I think this is some really important stuff for you guys to get to know and get a handle on. If you know these definitions, you're going to be able to evaluate things quicker. It's going to help you to churn through all of the different real estate deals that you're potentially looking at. And I hope this was a helpful video for you guys. If you like that, go ahead and give me that thumbs up, hit that like button. And you know, there's a whole bunch of you guys that watch our content that haven't subscribed. We would love to have you join the community. We're about to reach 10,000 people on the YouTube community. So with that, watch this video next, and we'll see you on the next one. God bless.